Jason had been coming to Iron Fist Dojo for years. He was one of the most advanced students there, a tall, strong guy with a black belt in karate and a loud, confident personality. Everyone knew him for his big smile, his fast moves, and his habit of joking around with the newer students. He wasn't a bad person, just a little too sure of himself sometimes. He liked to tease, to push people's buttons in a playful way, and most of the time, people laughed it off. That evening, the dojo was buzzing with energy. The mats were laid out, the sound of gloves hitting pads echoed in the air, and the faint smell of sweat and cleaning solution mixed together. Students were warming up, stretching their legs, and throwing a few punches at the air. The instructor was busy talking to a group near the corner, so people were chatting and practicing on their own. That's when Jason noticed someone new. She was standing quietly on the far side of the mat, tying the belt of her white GI. Her name was Maya. Jason had seen her once or twice before, but she usually kept to herself. She was average in height, slim but strong-looking, with sharp, focused eyes that seemed to take in everything happening around her. She wasn't trying to get attention. In fact, she looked like she was just there to train and learn. But some reason, maybe out of boredom or maybe because he wanted to test her, Jason decided to walk over. With his usual playful smirk, Jason called out loud enough for others to hear. "Hey Maya," he said, tilting his head. "You ready for a real fight?" His tone made it sound like a joke, like he didn't expect her to actually say yes. Some people nearby chuckled because they knew Jason's style. He liked to pick on the newcomers, not to hurt them, but to get a laugh or to show off a little. Jason added, "Don't worry, I'll go easy on you." That made a few people grin. It wasn't said in a mean way, but it was the kind of comment that could make someone feel underestimated. Maya paused for a second and looked at him. She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. She just studied his face, as if she was deciding whether he was serious. Jason crossed his arms, waiting for her to say something funny back, or maybe shake her head. Instead, Maya tied her hair into a tight ponytail, stood up straight, and said calmly, "All right. Let's do it." Her voice was soft but steady, and there was no hesitation in it. Jason blinked, a little surprised. "Wait, you're serious?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Why not?" she replied, shrugging lightly. The way she said it wasn't aggressive or defensive, it was simple. Matter of fact, like she didn't see any reason to refuse. A couple of the other students looked over, sensing something interesting was about to happen. Jason grinned again, trying to hide the fact that her confidence had caught him off guard. "Okay then," he said, pretending to stretch his neck and shoulders. "Let's see what you've got." By now, a small circle of people had started to form. They weren't expecting anything dramatic. Most assumed Jason would just move around, throw a few light punches. Maybe let her land one or two for fun, and that would be it. After all, he was a black belt, and she looked like a beginner. Jason, in his mind, had already decided to keep things light. He wasn't planning to hurt her, just to put on a little show. But he also couldn't resist the idea of showing her hand. Everyone else that challenging him was a whole different level. Maya, on the other hand, didn't seem interested in showing off. She didn't bounce around or throw practice punches in the air. She just stood there for a moment, breathing slowly, as if she was centering herself. Her calmness was almost strange in that noisy, bustling dojo. While Jason was chatting and making light jokes to the crowd, she was silently watching him, her eyes following every little movement he made. She didn't look nervous, but she didn't look arrogant either. It was as if she knew something that no one else did. Jason didn't. Notice this. He was too busy enjoying the attention, laughing with one of the guys in the crowd and adjusting his belt. He thought this was just going to be another fun sparring match where he could play the big brother role. He didn't realize that By underestimating her, he was walking into a moment that would be remembered in that gym for a long time. Everyone else thought the same thing. They didn't expect much from Maya, and that was exactly why what happened next would shock them. All the challenge had been made. Maya had accepted. And without anyone knowing, the air in the dojo had shifted. Jason stepped onto the mat with the kind of relaxed confidence only a seasoned fighter could have. His black belt hung neatly around his waist, the ends swaying as he adjusted his stance. He gave a playful half smile to the crowd that had now grown bigger. More students had gathered, sensing something unusual was about to happen. The dojo lights cast a warm glow over the scene, making the white mats look almost like a stage. And Jason was ready to be the star. Across from him, Maya quietly walked forward, her bare feet making almost no sound against the mat. She stopped. A few paces away from him, her posture upright, her chin slightly lifted. She didn't mirror Jason's playful energy. Instead, she looked calm, almost unreadable, as if her mind was somewhere beyond the moment. She rolled her shoulders back and took a deep, measured breath. To anyone watching closely, it was the breathing of someone who had trained for years, not the short, shallow breaths of a nervous beginner. Jason didn't pick up on that. He was too busy entertaining the people around him. "All right, rookie," he said with a light chuckle. "You're about to get a free lesson from a pro. Ready?" His tone was casual, but a little smug, and some people laughed along. A few of his friends in the back shouted things like, "Don't hurt her too bad, and this will be quick." They thought this would be nothing more than a warm-up for Jason. Maya's response was simple. She gave a small nod, her eyes locked on him. She didn't laugh at his jokes, and she didn't respond to the comments from the crowd. The silence around her made her presence stand out even more. It wasn't the silence of fear, it was the silence of someone who was listening, watching and waiting for the right moment. The instructor, curious about the commotion, walked over and raised an eyebrow. "All right," he said, "light sparring. No full contact. Let's keep it safe." Jason smirked and replied, "Of course, sensei. I'll take care of her." The instructor's gaze flicked to Maya, and for a split second, seemed like he knew something the others didn't. He gave a small nod and stepped back. Jason began to bounce lightly on his feet, loosening up. He shifted his weight from side to side, rolling his wrists, his eyes locked on Maya's stance. She didn't move much, but there was a certain tightness in her form. Her elbows were tucked, her knees slightly bent, her hands positioned in a way that suggested not just training, but discipline. Jason mistook her stillness for inexperience. He decided to open with something light, just to feel her out. "Here we go," he said, and stepped forward with a quick jab toward her shoulder. It was fast, but not full power, the kind of move meant to test a beginner's reaction. But to Jason's surprise, Maya didn't flinch. She didn't step back, so simply turned her wrist in a small, sharp motion and brushed his hand away before it even touched her. Her reaction was so clean, so natural, that it momentarily stopped him in his tracks. "Nice," Jason said with a grin, hiding the small jolt of surprise. He tried again, this time with a quick 1-2 combination, keeping it playful. Again, she slipped to the side, her movement efficient and controlled. No wasted energy, no panic, just precision. The murmurs from the crowd grew a little louder. A few people exchanged looks. Jason noticed, but shrugged it off. "All right, you've got some moves," he admitted, bouncing on his toes. "Let's see what else you can do." For the first time, Maya's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, not cocky, but almost as if she was silently accepting his challenge. She shifted her stance slightly, and for those who knew martial arts well, 'twas the kind of shift that said, "I'm ready now." Jason didn't realize it yet, but the joke match he had started was beginning to turn into something else entirely. The air in the dojo was changing. People weren't just waiting to see him put on a show anymore. They were watching to see what Maya would do next, and she was just getting started. Asterisk. The moment Maya said, "I'm ready," without actually speaking the words, something shifted in the room. Her body language changed in such a subtle way that only the truly observant would notice. Her knees bent just slightly more. Her shoulders dropped into a relaxed but alert position, and her eyes narrowed not in aggression, but in laser focus. It was the look of someone who wasn't here to prove anything flashy, but who also wasn't here to lose. Jason gave a small laugh, more to keep his own confidence up than anything else. He twirled his wrist in the air like he was warming up for a show. "All right, let's spice it up," he said, moving in with a quick sidestep. He threw a fast jab toward her chest, followed by a light roundhouse kick to test her reaction speed. To his surprise, Maya leaned just enough to let the jab graze past her, then pivoted her foot with perfect timing, so the kick barely touched her belt. Not it was clean. Too clean for a so-called beginner. Jason's grin twitched for half a second, but he covered it by bouncing back, nodding as if to say, "Not bad." The crowd made a soft "oh" sound, just enough to hint that something interesting was happening. Maya didn't chase him, didn't try to attack recklessly. Instead, she adjusted her stance again, shifting her weight onto her back leg. The movement was smooth, controlled, and almost professional. If anyone in the audience had a trained eye, they might have guessed that Maya wasn't new to fighting at all. Jason decided to put a little more heat into it. He darted forward with a sudden low sweep, aiming to catch her off balance. It was a move that worked on plenty of beginners. They'd stumble, and then he'd get the upper hand. But instead of stumbling, Maya reacted instantly. She lifted her front foot just enough to let his leg pass under, then stepped down and used the momentum to pivot away from him entirely. The move was so fluid that for a moment, Jason was the one off balance. He quickly turned back to face her. But by then, she was already set again, hands steady, breathing calm. The murmurs grew louder now. People weren't just smiling, they were leaning forward, their eyes darting between Jason and Maya like they didn't want to miss a second. One of Jason's friends called out from the side. "Hey man, don't let her show you up," he forced. A chuckle, but inside, something was shifting. This wasn't going how he expected. He wasn't dominating. He wasn't even landing clean shots. He tried again. This time with a sharper combination jab cross, hook each, one faster than before. But Maya's defense was like water. She didn't block with force, she redirected. Her arms flowed with his strikes, guiding them away instead of clashing. When the hook came in, she stepped inside his reach, close enough that he could see the calm in her eyes. Then, without hitting him, she tapped her open palm against his shoulder as if marking where she could have landed a solid blow. It was subtle, but Jason felt it, and he understood exactly what she meant. The crowd's chatter turned into surprised whispers. Someone near the back muttered, "She's not just good, she's really good." Jason stepped back, shaking his arms out. For the first time in the match, he wasn't smiling for the crowd. His eyes were locked on her, trying to figure her out. He realized that the joke had flipped. He wasn't the one in control anymore. Maya didn't look smug. She didn't smirk. She just gave that same quiet, unshakable focus. It was the kind of presence that made people take you seriously without you saying a single word. And right then, Jason knew if he didn't step up his game, the whole gym was about to see him get schooled. Asterisk, asterisk, the gym felt different now. The casual chatter from earlier had faded into a thick, heavy silence, broken only by the sound of bare feet sliding on the mat and the occasional creak of the floor beneath. It was as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the moment when one of them would finally break through. Jason bounced lightly on his toes. but his movements had lost that lazy, playful rhythm. Now his stance was tighter, his eyes sharper. This wasn't the "I'll go easy on you" kind of fight anymore. He was taking Maya seriously, maybe even more seriously than he wanted to admit. Maya didn't change her expression. She stood there with the same calm, the same measured breathing, like she was conserving every ounce of energy for the exact moment she needed it. Her focus was absolute, the kind of focus that made it seem like Jason was the only thing in the world she saw. Jason made the first move, a quick step forward followed by a snapping front kick aimed at her midsection. He threw it faster than before, his foot slicing through the air with a sharp whip sound. But Maya pivoted at the last second, letting the kick pass just inches from her. She didn't just dodge, she used the momentum of her turn to step in. Close, her lead hand flicking out in a quick, precise tap against his ribs. It wasn't a hit meant to hurt, but it was a message. I could have landed that for real. The crowd reacted immediately. Some gasped, others let out a low whistle. Jason's friends stopped joking. They were watching now with the same kind of interest you'd give a cliffhanger scene in a movie. Jason smiled, this time not the cocky grin from before, but a tight, competitive smile. "All right," he muttered under his breath. "You want to play for real?" He came at her again, this time with a flurry jab, cross, hook, low kick, then a spinning back fist. It was the kind of sequence meant to overwhelm, to make the opponent panic. But Maya didn't panic. She read each strike as if she'd seen them 100 times before. Her head moved just enough to let the punches skim past. Her arms redirected. The hook harmlessly. She lifted her leg to check the low kick before it could make contact. And when the spinning back fist came, she simply ducked under and stepped to the side. Leaving Jason striking nothing but air, the room erupted in a mix of laughter, disbelief, and applause. Not laughter at Jason, but laughter in that "oh my God, did you see that" kind of way. Jason spun back toward her, and now there was no denying it, he was breathing harder. Just a little, but enough for someone like Maya to notice. And she did. For the first time, Maya stepped forward aggressively. It wasn't a wild rush, just a slow, steady advance that made Jason instinctively back up. She tested him with a light jab. He blocked. She tried a low kick. He checked it. Then, without warning, she fired a lightning-fast side kick that stopped just short of his chest. The force of the air from it brushing against his GI. Jason froze for a second. If she had followed through, it would have landed clean. That was the moment the gym really went silent. No one moved, no one spoke. Even the instructor, standing off to the side, gave the faintest hint of a smile. Jason lowered his guard slightly, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement. "Okay," he said quietly. "You're the real deal." Maya didn't respond. She simply stepped back into her stance, ready for whatever came next. The crowd could feel if things were no longer just interesting. They were electric. Everyone knew the next exchange could be the one that decided the match, and they were all on the edge of their seats. The energy in the dojo had completely changed. A few minutes ago, it was just another evening of training, laughter, and casual sparring. Now, it felt like everyone had stumbled into the middle of a championship match they hadn't paid to see. Every pair of eyes was locked on Jason and Maya. Even the sound of their breathing seemed louder in the stillness. Jason adjusted his stance again, but it was different this time. His movements were tighter, more deliberate. Gone was the easy swagger. Now he looked like a man in a real fight. A drop of sweat ran down his temple, and though he quickly wiped it away, Maya noticed. She noticed everything. Maya stood tall, but loose, her posture balanced like she could explode forward or slip away at any second. Her face was calm, but her eyes were locked on Jason with pinpoint focus. She wasn't reading his muscles, she was reading his intent. Every slight twitch, every shift in weight, she tracked it all without him realizing. Jason decided to turn up the intensity. He feinted a low kick, then came in with a high roundhouse aimed at her head. The move was fast, so fast that a few people in the crowd gasped, thinking it might land. But at the very last fraction of a second, Maya leaned just far enough for the kick to slice past her hair. Before Jason could recenter his balance, she pivoted on her front foot and swept her back leg toward his standing leg. It wasn't hard enough to knock him down, but it forced him to stumble sideways. The crowd reacted instantly, half of them with cheers, the other half with stunned silence. Jason straightened quickly, masking his surprise. "All right," he muttered. Under his breath, no more games. He came in again, this time with a series of rapid strikes. Jab, cross, hook, body shot, up. His punches were faster, harder, sharper, and this time they clipped Maya's guard, forcing her to step back. 4. The first time, she was giving ground, but she wasn't retreating in panic, she was guiding him. Each step backward drew him in, making him commit more and more to his attack. Jason didn't see it at first, but the crowd began to realize. She was setting a trap. As Jason launched another heavy cross, Maya pivoted sharply on her back foot, letting the punch glide past her. In the same motion, she stepped to his side and tapped him on the shoulder, not enough to hurt, but enough to make him spin halfway around. The move was so quick and so clean that the people watching let out another collective "Oh-h-h-h." Jason turned back to face her, his breathing heavier now, his face flushed. He wasn't just fighting to win anymore, he was fighting to save face. The black belt who was supposed to dominate this spar was suddenly the one on defense. Maya didn't press forward recklessly. She simply reset her stance, eyes still locked on him, her breathing steady. It was almost unfair how composed she looked compared to him. Jason tried to shake off the growing tension with a quick smirk, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're full of surprises," he said, but his voice carried a hint of something else. Respect. The crowd had stopped whispering now. No one dared speak. They were leaning forward, eyes wide, as if one blink might make them miss the moment everything turned. Jason knew he had to go all in soon. But so did Maya, and deep down, Jason had a sinking feeling. She'd been holding back this whole time. ***, Jason's chest rose and fell more quickly now. His breath was heavier, but he kept bouncing on his toes, trying to hide the fatigue creeping into his arms and legs. The heat in the dojo felt thicker, and every bead of sweat that rolled down his forehead seemed to remind him this wasn't the casual joke match he thought it would be. Maya, on the other hand, looked like she'd barely broken a sweat. Her face was calm, her posture relaxed, but her eyes never left him. They were sharp, focused, and unblinking, like a hawk watching its prey, waiting for the exact moment to strike. Jason decided it was time to put his experience to the test. He feinted a jab, stepped to the side, and threw a spinning hook kick aimed toward her upper body. It was one of his signature moves, fast, fluid, and usually a crowd pleaser. But Maya didn't even flinch. She stepped in just before the kick could build full momentum, placing herself at the perfect angle where his strike lost power. With one smooth motion, she tapped his chest with an open palm, the kind of touch that didn't hurt but made it crystal clear. She could have hit him with force if she wanted. The crowd exploded in gasps and shouts. A few people clapped without thinking. Jason's eyes widened for just a split second before he stepped back, resetting his stance. He was realizing something dangerous. Maya wasn't reacting to him anymore. She was predicting him. They circled each other in silence now. Jason's mind raced. She's reading me. She knows where I'm going before I do. That thought gnawed at him, but pride pushed it away. He came in again, faster, sharper, low kick, high kick, double punch combination. The sound of his strikes, cutting through the air, echoed in the room. But every single one was either blocked, redirected, or avoided by the smallest of movements. And then happened the turning point. Jason launched a powerful roundhouse kick aimed at her ribs, putting real force behind it. But Maya's eyes caught it early. She shifted just enough to let it slide past. Then, in the same heartbeat, she stepped in and hooked her leg around his standing leg. Before Jason knew what was happening, his balance disappeared. His body tilted, gravity took over, and the next thing he felt was the mat beneath him. The dojo went silent. Jason blinked up at the ceiling for a moment. Now, the reality of what just happened sinking in. He hadn't been beaten like that in years. Maya stood a few feet away, not in a triumphant pose, but in the same calm, collected stance she'd had since the beginning. She didn't gloat. She didn't grinch. She simply waited for him to get back up. Jason rolled to his feet, brushing the dust off his GI, his pride stinging more than his body. For the first time, there was no trace of arrogance in his voice when he said, "You're better than I thought." From the side of the mat, someone whispered, "Better." She's outclassing him. A ripple of quiet agreement passed through. The crowd, even the instructor, usually strict about silence during sparring, let a faint smirk slip across his face. Jason knew now this wasn't about if he could win. It was about surviving without being completely humiliated. And deep down, he realized something else too. She wasn't even using her full strength yet. Days passed after the match, but the story refused to fade from the walls of Iron Fist Dojo. It spread like wildfire, not just among the students who had been there, but to friends, family, and even other gyms in the city. People weren't just talking about the fight. They were talking about Maya. Her name carried a new kind of weight now. Students who had barely noticed her before were suddenly paying attention, watching the way she trained. The precision in her movements, the quiet discipline in her posture. It never sought the spotlight, but it followed her anyway. Jason, too, found himself in the middle of a shift. At first, there had been a small sting to the loss. It's never easy to be taken down in front of a crowd. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the spar had done something for him that winning never could have. It had stripped away his assumptions, sharpened his respect, and humbled his pride in a way that only a real challenge could. He didn't avoid Maya after that. In fact, he often sought her out for training, asking for tips on footwork or timing. They began to spar regularly, not as a joke, but as equals. The dojo itself seemed to change too. There was a new energy in the air, a sense that anyone, no matter their size, gender, or background, could surprise you if you weren't ready. The instructors noticed students training harder, paying more attention, and taking every opponent seriously. One evening, weeks later, the instructor gathered everyone before class and said, "A fighter's worth isn't measured by their belt. Color, it's measured by their discipline, respect, and readiness." Some of you learned that lesson the hard way. He glanced knowingly at Jason, who grinned sheepishly. But we all benefit when one person teaches it to us. His eyes then shifted to Maya, and for the first time, she allowed herself a genuine smile in front of the whole class. That night, during warm-ups, 2 new students whispered to each other, pointing subtly toward her. "That's her," one said. "The one who took down the black belt." The other student's eyes widened. "No way. She doesn't even look like." He stopped mid-sentence, realizing the irony of his words. And that was the quiet magic of it all. Maya didn't need to tell her story. She didn't need to prove herself again. The lesson had been planted in every person who had seen or heard. About that match, never underestimate quiet strength. As for Jason, he carried that lesson into every fight, every drill, every new student he taught. When someone bragged too much or laughed off a challenge, he would smirk and say, "Be careful. You never know when someone's about to teach you a lesson you'll never forget." And somewhere in the corner of the dojo, Maya would be training. Calm and focused, as always, letting her actions speak louder than any words ever could. Asterisk, asterisk, months turned into years. And the memory of that day at Iron Fist Dojo never faded. People still spoke of it as if it had happened last week, the fight that silenced the gym. The moment when a quiet newcomer shifted the entire atmosphere of a place built on discipline and respect. For Maya, life in the dojo remained much the same. On the surface, she still trained with the same quiet focus, still arrived early and left late, still preferred practice over small talk. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. She had earned not just the respect of her peers, but their trust. Students began seeking her advice and technique, breathing, mental focus. She never acted like a superior, never flaunted her ability. But her presence became an unspoken source of inspiration. Jason's transformation was perhaps even more striking. The man who once teased newcomers and fought with an easy swagger had become one of the dojo's most encouraging mentors. He trained harder than ever, not to maintain his pride, but to grow past it. And every now and then, he would tell a new student about the day Maya beat him not as an embarrassment, but as his favorite lesson in martial arts. "That was the day I stopped fighting just to win," he would say, and started fighting to learn. Years later, Maya entered her first regional martial arts tournament not for glory, but because her instructor insisted it was time the outside world saw what she could do. Jason volunteered to coach her, standing in her corner as she stepped onto the mat under bright lights. Just before the match began, he leaned down and whispered, "Remember that day you silenced the whole gym? Do it again, but this time, the whole arena." She smiled faintly, that same quiet smile from years ago, and nodded. Maya's fights that day became the stuff of legend. Her precision, her calm, her timing, they made even seasoned fighters look clumsy. By the end of the tournament, she stood on the podium with a gold medal around her neck, but her expression was the same as always, steady. Humble, unshaken by the weight of victory. The dojo celebrated her win for weeks, but the biggest change came afterward. Enrollment spiked as word spread about the woman who moves like water. Young girls especially began joining, many of them saying they wanted to fight like Maya. Jason watched all of it with pride. He knew the truth, that the medal, the matches, the victories, none of that was what made her extraordinary. What made her unforgettable was the same thing that silenced the gym. Years ago, her ability to show strength without arrogance, to win without humiliation, to teach without saying a word. And as the years went on, whenever a new student underestimated an opponent based on appearance, someone in the dojo would always say the same thing: "Careful. Remember Maya."